What'll happen to the Yellowstone Ranch? That's a question that's basically been the focal point of Paramount's epic western, Yellowstone, for as long as anyone can remember. When the series first premiered in 2018, we were introduced to the Dutton family and their many enemies. Everyone wanted ownership of the largest ranch in Montana, but it was the Duttons to keep. Or was it? Season 5's Part 2, that's the finale, is drawing closer and closer. This means that the answer to the long-awaited question is also drawing near. Unfortunately, John Dutton isn't going to be the one answering it. He's effectively out of the running, but not because anything happened to the character on the show. Oh no, John Dutton might or might not be alive and well. It all depends on the direction series creator Taylor Sheridan is willing to take. Why the ambiguity surrounding the show's leading character? Simple. The character who played him, that's Kevin Costner, made the shocking announcement back in 2022 that he will not play the Dutton family patriarch any longer. What happened? What led to this startling announcement? Why didn't anyone try to stop him? And what are the conditions for his return? That's what we're here to talk about. Did Yellowstone save Kevin Costner's career? He needs no introduction. Hollywood's leading man for several decades now, Kevin Costner, is one of the most talented and recognizable actors out there. He's had a series of hits that have gained him international recognition along with several millions to his name. Costner's a great actor, and there are no two ways about it. We recently got to see how amazing he is on the small screen with his starring role on Yellowstone. However, did anyone ever consider that the Western saved his career? We might have to go a little back here. Costner gained prominence in Hollywood as the star to look out for in 1981 when he debuted. His career trajectory only went up from there with one hit after another: The Untouchables, No Way Out, Field of Dreams, Dances with Wolves, and who could ever forget The Bodyguard? Sure, between his debut in 1981 and when his career really took a nosedive in 1995, Costner did star in a few movies that didn't fare all too well. Robin Hood, The Prince of Thieves was a commercial failure even though Costner had poured a lot of his money into production. Critics weren't too thrilled with Costner's portrayal of the acclaimed fictional character. However, he more than made up for it when he starred in The Bodyguard, reclaiming his A-lister status. Once you star in a critical and commercial hit such as The Bodyguard, you've essentially cemented your status in Hollywood as a star actor. Costner had fortunately shown tremendous potential as an actor by the time Waterworld and The Postman were released in the late 90s. To put their failures into perspective, they've consistently been listed as the worst movies of all time. Waterworld might have actually had a fighting chance, to be fair. The reason why the film flopped wasn't necessarily because of the acting or the direction, but the fact that they poured in too much money to make the movie happen. Again, Costner had paid out of pocket to make the movie a reality. While Waterworld wasn't panned by critics, it wasn't that well liked either. In fact, even the people who enjoyed the movie claimed that it felt a little dragged. The Postman was a different story altogether. In fact, it almost ended Costner's career. The movie was panned by critics and reportedly hated by everyone in theaters. In 1997, when The Postman was released, Costner had hyped up the movie in press tours as one of the best storylines ever. He truly did believe that because he'd also taken up the role as director, financier, and leading man for the film, only to lose almost everything when the movie made virtually nothing. It did win 5 awards, however, that is, if you consider the Golden Raspberries awards. The film won for Worst Picture, Worst Actor, and Worst Director for Costner. Not really something that would go on the actor's mantle. Everything was wrong with The Postman. The critics believed that even Costner's acting couldn't save the train wreck. The film did so poorly that many people refused to work with the actor because of it. Costner's career eventually made a comeback in the 2000s. After all, he was a great actor. The only problem now was that he gained a sort of reputation for being difficult to work with. Circling back to Robin Hood, Costner wasn't the first pick for the role. In fact, when he was offered the role, it came with a lot of liberties because he had higher star power. The crew was just happy to have him on board, and if that meant doing whatever he wanted, they were okay with it. It didn't help much that Costner was also financing the film. So while Costner was the leading man, he also got a seat at the director's table. Reportedly, he made several changes to the script over and over again. The final version of the film was nothing like the first draft. In hindsight, the original director should have followed his gut because Costner's edit flopped big time. Likewise, Costner had a reported screaming match with the crew of For Love of the Game because he wouldn't accept a role as solely the leading actor. Costner has always wanted more control over the direction his projects go in. Yes, sometimes it's worked out well for him and he's been able to create a masterpiece. More often than not, however, it just doesn't work. But Costner refuses to accept that. So by the time Yellowstone was offered to the actor, he'd built sort of a reputation for himself and wasn't working on as many projects because of it. His career had taken several hits over the years, and he could really do with a project that was bigger than anything anyone had ever seen. A project like Yellowstone, of course. So in 2018, Costner made the best decision for his career since The Bodyguard, and redeemed himself from the worst decision he'd ever made, which was to turn down Shawshank Redemption to focus on movies we've never heard of. John Dutton now became one of Kevin Costner's biggest roles, and he was earning millions per episode of the Paramount show. Everything was going good until one day when Costner decided it was time to up and leave. The real reason Kevin Costner wanted to leave. Was leaving Yellowstone the biggest career mistake Costner had made since The Postman? No, it was actually a bigger mistake, and you'll know why when you hear the real reason why he quit the show that revived his career. So we have to go back here to late 2022 when the rumor mill reported tensions on the set of the Western. Remembering Costner's tendency to steamroll direction, he'd reportedly butted heads with Taylor more than just a few times. Sometimes Costner's vision was artistic and made sense for the show. Other times, it simply didn't. More than anything, however, Yellowstone had always been a pet project for Taylor. He claimed that he'd never let anyone else take away from a show he'd worked so hard on. Not just the writing and direction, but Taylor had reportedly been working with production houses for years before Paramount eventually signed the show. He'd been working on Sons of Anarchy as an actor when he had the idea for the epic Western. Speaking of which, Taylor doesn't really have the fondest memories of his time on the small screen. He'd rather spend his time working behind the camera than in front of it. In any case, Yellowstone was a dream come true for the series' creator, who had been rejected by several media houses until Season 1 was finally ready in 2018. It was a gamble for Taylor, who poured his blood, sweat, and tears into the show, but it was one that paid off, in millions, if we're specific. Catching up to 2022, it was reported that Costner wanted more creative control over Yellowstone, or at least over his character, John Dutton. Unfortunately for him, John was Taylor's brainchild and also the moneymaker. If there was one thing Taylor wasn't willing to do, it was to give Costner complete control over his creation. So you'd think that the reason why Costner walked off set never to return was because of an all-too-familiar Hollywood scenario, right? Well, that was reportedly one of several reasons that contributed to Costner's decision to ultimately walk away. The way the rumor goes is that Paramount did try to intervene between Costner and Taylor and work out a compromise. They couldn't do the show without Taylor, who owned it, and they also didn't want to tank ratings by having Costner walk away. The compromise was to give Costner some creative control, and apparently Taylor agreed to it too. Then why did the actor leave? Again, there were more than just a few reasons why things didn't work out. Besides asking for more creative liberties, Costner was also asking for more money from the show. You have to remember that the actor was the leading man and an acclaimed legend in his own right. This meant that whatever anyone else on the show was making, Costner was making thrice that. There was no way Paramount could have anyone match his per episode salary, much less raise Costner's own income any further. So that's what led to the breakdown in negotiations. Costner wanted more of everything, creative control and money. He wasn't willing to compromise on either, and if he wasn't given what he was asking for, he'd walk. In the end, that's exactly what he did. He walked away from the show that revived his career. In hindsight, it might have been one of the biggest mistakes he's ever made. However, if you were to believe yet a third source here, it was something that Costner had to do, not necessarily wanted to do. Here's the thing. Costner and his wife of almost a decade, Christine Baumgartner, separated sometime in 2022 and were officially divorced in 2024. And yes, it had a lot to do with Yellowstone. Christine is the mother of 3 of Costner's kids. The couple were reportedly thriving until one day, reports suggested that Christine had given Costner an ultimatum. He'd been spending a lot of time away from the family in Montana to shoot for Yellowstone. He'd be gone for months on end, and Christine was at her wit's end. She'd experienced this before with Costner fully immersing himself into a project and not coming home. So she made him choose. Costner made the decision to prioritize his personal life over his professional career to save his marriage. Unfortunately for him, the marriage was no longer salvageable, and Christine officially filed for divorce sometime later. As of right now, the couple are divorced after a lengthy and contentious court battle over child support and alimony. The pair have, however, moved on. Christine's dating a former friend of the family and a neighbor, while Costner's been seen around private islands with a socialite. All's well that ends well, right? But what if we said there's a fourth possibility on why Costner left Yellowstone, and this is the one that makes the most sense? All the ways Horizon failed. Taylor might have irked Costner with his rigidness, and Paramount might have gotten off on the wrong foot with the actor when they refused to renegotiate his salary. Christine wanting to end their marriage definitely didn't help. Yet it seems like the real reason why Kevin Costner upped and left the set of Yellowstone was to follow a passion project of his, one that was a long time in the making. To preface, we have to go back to the late 90s when Kevin first started his hand out at directing and producing. Now, historically, passion projects haven't worked out well for the star, with Waterworld and The Postman both being movies he's poured his heart, soul, and cash flow into. But Horizon was going to be different. At least, that's what Costner told himself. The epic Western film had been in the works for decades by the time it was eventually picked up. So for anyone out there thinking that Kevin stole the idea from Taylor, you'd be wrong. Horizon's timeline predates Yellowstone's. Yes, however, if you were to say that Costner got inspired by Taylor to restart his passion project, that wouldn't be too far off from the truth. Anyway, fans believe that the real reason why Kevin just wasn't interested in being John Dutton anymore was because he got a sweeter deal elsewhere. Horizon had been in the making for decades with the script planned out and everything. All Kevin needed was a production house to sign off on it. There had been a few deals along the way, but nothing ever materialized. That's why when the film was finally picked up, Costner wanted to devote his all to it. Yep, that meant walking away from the Yellowstone Ranch.